November 21st, 1980. 7 o'clock in the morning. Inside the largest hotel in the world, 5,000 people were still asleep. The MGM Grand Hotel stood as a monument to everything Las Vegas represented. 26 stories of luxury with 2,100 rooms and a casino floor larger than 2 football fields. In just 17 minutes, a small electrical spark would transform this palace into a death trap. 85 people would never leave alive. This is the story of the deadliest disaster in Las Vegas history. Tell us in the comments what time you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories that change history. The MGM Grand wasn't just another casino when it opened in December 1973. It was Kirk Kerkorian's declaration that bigger was always better, with the famous MGM lion at the entrance perfectly capturing that audacity. Walking into the casino meant entering a world without windows or clocks, where the floor stretched endlessly with slot machines and tables under crystal chandeliers. Every detail was designed to keep people gambling and spending. Above it all, the hotel tower rose into the Nevada sky, with 2,100 rooms ranging from luxurious standards to high roller suites, where money seemed abstract. People came for everything. High rollers arrived ready to bet fortunes. Families drove from California for shows and pools. Entertainers performed in showrooms with names on marquees visible for miles. Conventioneers filled meeting rooms by day and the casino by night. For everyone, the MGM Grand represented the Vegas dream made real. Thousands of employees kept this operation running around the clock. Dealers, waitresses, kitchen staff, housekeepers, security guards, and engineers maintained the carefully choreographed performance that never stopped. But beneath the glamour existed a critical vulnerability. The casino floor had no sprinkler system. Nevada law didn't require sprinklers in single-story portions of buildings, and the casino qualified for exemption. The fire alarm system was minimal, mostly manual pull stations. There was no voice communication system. These weren't mistakes, but results of following building codes that had never imagined what was about to happen. On the morning of November 21st, none of this mattered. Guests slept off the previous night. Early gamblers chased losses. Staff began another routine shift. Everything was exactly normal. And in the ground floor delicatessen, hidden inside a wall space, an electrical wire was beginning to overheat. The fire started in a soffit above the deli, where an electrical ground fault created resistance and heat. The wire, installed years earlier and surrounded by materials never meant to get hot, heated steadily in the darkness. When insulation finally ignited, flames spread along paper-based materials and plastic fixtures in the hidden channel. Smoke seeped through gaps, but the deli was between shifts and the few staff present were focused on prep work, not the ceiling above. By the time someone noticed actual flames, fire had spread into the dropped ceiling running across the casino. This space, filled with acoustic tiles, electrical wiring, insulation-wrapped ducts, and decades of dust, became a horizontal chimney. The fire moved through it with terrifying speed, invisible below, growing larger and hotter by the second. A Keno runner saw smoke pouring from a light fixture and ran for security, but precious minutes were lost in confusion. Was it smoke or dust from vents? Where was it coming from? Should they pull the alarm or investigate first? These reasonable questions from people who'd never encountered real emergency cost time they didn't have. When fire broke through into the casino, it came with explosive force. Flames rolled across ceiling tiles, igniting them in sequence. Thick black smoke poured into the casino floor. Not gentle wisps, but churning clouds reducing visibility to 0 in seconds. The fire had found perfect conditions: flammable carpeting, upholstered furniture, wooden slot machines, plastic signs, decorative elements chosen for appearance over safety. The casino's open design meant no fire doors, no barriers, nothing to slow the spread. The air conditioning system, designed for comfort, now distributed smoke and toxic gases. Vents pulled smoke in and pushed it throughout the ground floor, into hallways, elevator shafts, and stairwells. Within minutes, smoke traveled everywhere and began its deadly journey upward. Staff response was hampered by the casino's nature. Most employees couldn't see the actual fire location. Smoke was everywhere, but flames were concentrated in areas customers weren't supposed to access. Security tried reaching the fire with extinguishers, but heat and smoke drove them back. Some workers evacuated customers, but there was no coordinated announcement, no clear plan. Some dealers ran. Others stayed at their posts, unsure if leaving might cost them their jobs. Guest reactions varied wildly. Those near the deli saw flames and ran for exits. Others deeper in the casino saw only smoke and assumed it was minor, something staff would handle. Some continued gambling even as smoke thickened, not wanting to abandon hot streaks, conditioned by casino psychology to ignore reality and consequences. The fire fed on itself, temperatures climbing past 1,000 degrees. Plastic melted, adding toxic smoke. Metal structures warped from heat. No sprinkler system activated because none existed. No water rained from the ceiling. Flames climbed walls and raced across surfaces following fuel and airflow, caring nothing for architectural boundaries humans imagined would contain them. 10 minutes after ignition, the casino floor was becoming uninhabitable. Smoke descended to head height. Temperature rose even far from flames. Carbon monoxide and toxic gases accumulated in lethal concentrations. People panicked, pushing toward exits, shouting for loved ones, crawling where air was clearer. Outside, someone finally called the fire department, but first trucks were minutes away and operators couldn't comprehend what they were told. A fire at the MGM Grand? How big? In the tower above, most guests still slept unaware. But in stairwells and elevator shafts, smoke was already rising, pulled upward by stack effect created by the building's height. These vertical channels acted as chimneys, drawing hot gases from the ground floor and distributing them throughout the tower. Within minutes, people 20 stories up would wake to smoke-filled rooms with no idea why. No understanding of what was happening below, no way to know their trusted building had become a trap. The MGM Grand Tower was steel frame construction, 26 stories of guest rooms stacked above the casino. Theory said this design should protect upper floors from ground-level fire. The tower was separated from the casino by a floor-ceiling assembly meant to prevent fire and smoke migration. But theory and practice were about to diverge catastrophically. The building had vertical channels running through it like arteries. 3 stairwells connected ground to roof. 8 elevator shafts moved guests between floors. Countless smaller openings existed for electrical, plumbing, HVAC, and communication systems. Each penetration was supposed to be sealed against smoke, but construction reality meant many gaps existed, from sloppy workmanship or post-opening modifications. These invisible gaps became highways for smoke and superheated gases. Stack effect began immediately. Hot air rises, and in tall buildings this effect magnifies tremendously. Fire on the ground created massive heat. Smoke and gases, heated to hundreds of degrees, became less dense and began rising. Stairwells and elevator shafts provided nearly unobstructed vertical paths. What started as wisps quickly became a torrent, a river of toxic gases flowing upward at increasing speed. The stairwells were particularly deadly because they were supposed to be safe. Building codes required stairwells and high rises be pressurized and sealed for protected evacuation routes. But the MGM Grand stairwells weren't pressurized, and doors at each floor weren't designed to resist smoke. When smoke entered at ground level, it rose like water filling a pipe, emerging at each floor and seeping under doors into hallways, serving guest rooms. Elevator shafts were worse. When doors opened on the ground floor, whether from call buttons or automatic programming, they created direct openings between smoke-filled casino and shaft. Smoke rushed in, and elevator cars acted like pistons pushing smoke upward. Some elevators were called to upper floors by unknowing guests. When doors opened, smoke poured into hallways, making rooms uninhabitable before occupants knew a fire existed. The ventilation system, designed for comfort, became a distribution network for death. It pulled air from various building parts, conditioned it, and redistributed through ductwork reaching every room. Smoke entered at multiple points and was pushed throughout the tower. Rooms that should have been isolated suddenly filled with smoke, not because fire reached them, but because the building's own systems delivered it. The smoke itself was insidious. This wasn't gray smoke from burning wood, but toxic cocktail from modern materials. Plastics, synthetic fabrics, foam padding, vinyl wall coverings, petroleum-based products. These release carbon monoxide, hydrogen cyanide, and dozens of other compounds. Carbon monoxide poisoned blood's oxygen-carrying ability. Hydrogen cyanide interfered with cells using oxygen. Together, they could incapacitate in minutes and kill in less than 10. The building had no sprinklers in guest rooms. Nevada codes in 1973 didn't require them, only in certain public and service areas. Theory was that fires starting in guest rooms would be small and controllable by fire departments. No one considered what would happen if smoke from a massive fire elsewhere filled those rooms, because assumptions said floors and walls would prevent that. Codes were written for fires that behaved predictably, stayed in one area, gave people time to react. The fire alarm system was equally inadequate. Smoke detectors existed in some areas, heat detectors in others, but no building-wide alarm alerting everyone simultaneously. When alarms sounded, there were bells barely audible over casino noise. There was no voice evacuation system, no way to announce what was happening or what to do. Guest rooms had no smoke detectors at all. Guests only knew about fire when smoke seeped under doors or someone knocked to warn them. Lack of compartmentalization meant once smoke entered the tower, it spread with minimal resistance. In properly designed high-rises, each floor should be a separate fire zone sealed from others. Doors should close automatically when fire is detected. Stairwells should remain smoke-free. HVAC should shut down, preventing smoke circulation. None of this happened because the systems didn't exist. Much of this was preventable with 1980 technology. Sprinklers had existed for a century and were proven to control or extinguish early-stage fires. Smoke control systems could pressurize stairwells, preventing infiltration. Fire-rated doors and walls could compartmentalize effectively. Voice evacuation systems could give clear instructions. But these systems cost money, and in 1973, they weren't code required for this building type. The owners followed the law. Architects designed a code. Contractors built what was specified. Inspectors approved what was built. Everyone did their jobs according to existing rules, and the result was a building that looked safe but contained vulnerabilities that would only become apparent in the worst circumstances. The MGM Grand was an aberration, but typical of how high-rise hotels were built in that era, making this not just one building's tragedy, but a wake-up call for an entire industry. As smoke poured into upper floors, the building's fatal flaws demonstrated themselves in real time. Guests woke to smoke-filled rooms with no idea of its source or what to do. Stairwells that should have been escape routes were choked with smoke. Elevators some instinctively headed toward were death traps. The ventilation providing fresh air pumped poison into rooms. And through it all, no announcement, no alarm, no coordinated response telling them the casino 20 floors below was burning and they needed to get out immediately. Lower floor guests realized first, where smoke arrived within minutes. Some woke to acrid chemical smell, triggering danger instincts. Others heard shouting in hallways from staff who'd come from below knocking on doors, trying to warn people to evacuate. Reactions varied wildly based on personality, experience, and each room's particular circumstances. On the 8th floor, a Chicago businessman opened his door to a hallway filled with thick smoke. He couldn't see more than feet in either direction. Training from a years-old fire safety course kicked in. He dropped to knees, felt the door to ensure it wasn't hot, then crawled into the hallway, pulling his door shut behind. He stayed low, one hand on the wall, moving toward where he remembered seeing the stairwell. The carpet was hot under his hands. He couldn't breathe without coughing, so he held his breath as long as possible, took quick gasps when necessary, kept moving. He found the stairwell door by touch, but discovered it was worse than the hallway. He retreated, oriented himself, tried the opposite direction, found another equally bad stairwell. His third attempt led to a clearer stairwell, not smoke-free but breathable. He went down floor after floor, passing others doing the same. Everyone silent except for coughing, focused only on descending. He emerged onto the casino floor 15 minutes after leaving his room and ran through smoke and chaos to an exit. On the 14th floor, a family of 4 faced different circumstances. Parents woke to smoke in their room, but not the hallway yet. They had seconds to decide: leave now or stay, take kids into potentially worse conditions, or keep them here. They chose to run, picking up 2 children and heading for the stairwell. The hallway was getting smoky but navigable. They reached the stairwell and started down, but by the 10th floor, smoke was unbearable. Children were crying, coughing. The father's eyes streamed tears. They couldn't see anything. He chose to exit onto the 10th floor, thinking they could find another way down or reach clearer air. The 10th floor hallway was worse than the stairwell. They tried going back up, but became disoriented. A security guard found them wandering, redirected them to a different stairwell, and they eventually made it out after 30 minutes of terror the children would never forget. Higher floors presented more complex scenarios because smoke took longer to reach them. On the 20th floor, many slept through early stages, waking only when smoke seeping under doors reached concentrations triggering consciousness. By then, hallways were often impassable. Stairwells were chimneys of smoke. Some open doors saw conditions and made the crucial decision to stay in rooms. They blocked door gaps with wet towels, turned off ventilation, opened windows, and waited for rescue. This counterintuitive decision saved many lives. The roof became a gathering point as smoke made lower floors untenable. People climbed completely dark stairwells filled with smoke, feeling their way up instead of down, driven by instinct that up meant away from fire. Emerging onto the roof, they found dozens of others already there, some in pajamas, some wrapped in bed sheets, all coughing and disoriented. The roof was windy and cold, November morning temperature in the 40s, but the air was clear and breathable. Helicopters began arriving within 20 minutes. Civilian pilots who heard about the fire on radio and flew to help without being asked. They landed, took as many people as they could fit, flew them to parking lots, then returned for more. Helicopter rescues saved dozens, but were chaotic and dangerous. Rotor wash blowing smoke around, people panicking and crowding too close to aircraft. Not everyone made it out. On the 16th floor, smoke overcame a group in a hallway before they could reach any exit. They collapsed within sight of a stairwell door. On the 19th floor, several guests died in their rooms, apparently never waking as carbon monoxide levels rose to lethal concentrations. The poison gas was insidious, causing confusion and sleepiness before unconsciousness. People who might have escaped grew tired, sat down to rest, and never got back up. Firefighters from Las Vegas Fire Department faced situations beyond worst-case scenarios. First engines pulled up to find ground floor engulfed with smoke pouring from every opening. They grabbed hoses and advanced into the casino, but heat drove them back. Smoke was so thick thermal imaging was useless. They tried establishing water supply, but building standpipes weren't where expected. Radio communication was difficult because steel and concrete blocked signals. They couldn't get accurate information about how many people remained inside or their locations. The incident commander decided to focus on rescue rather than fire attack. Crews were sent up stairwells with breathing apparatus, searching floor by floor for victims. They found people in hallways, stairwells, and rooms. Some were already dead. Some were unconscious but alive. Others were conscious but disoriented, sitting in corners, unable to move on their own. Firefighters carried them out one by one, floor after floor, trip after trip. The physical toll was enormous. Breathing apparatus tanks ran out. Firefighters had to exit to change bottles, then go back in. Some made 5 or 6 trips, each time climbing multiple floors in full gear, each time bringing someone out. Ladder trucks positioned around the building's exterior provided another rescue avenue. Firefighters extended ladders to windows and helped people climb down floor by floor. It was slow and terrifying for guests, many who'd never been on ladders, but it worked. One by one, people climbed out windows, stepped on a ladder rungs, and made their way down with firefighters coaching from below. For upper floors where ladders couldn't reach, firefighters broke windows to vent smoke and gave instructions to stay in rooms until crews could reach them. Survivors who made it out described scenes that seemed impossible. People crawling through hallways completely blind from smoke. Families separated in chaos, children lost, spouses missing. Elderly guests unable to walk being carried by strangers. Staff who stayed to help guests instead of evacuating immediately. The randomness of survival, where one person's room filled with smoke while their neighbors remained clear, where one stairwell was passable while another was lethal, where choosing to go up instead of down, to stay instead of run, to turn left instead of right meant the difference between life and death. The fire burned for hours, but most deaths occurred in the first 30 minutes. The smoke was that deadly, that fast-moving, that toxic. By the time firefighters reached many victims, they'd been dead for a while. Causes were determined as smoke inhalation in the vast majority, carbon monoxide poisoning, sometimes combined with toxic gas exposure. Very few were burned. Most were killed by invisible gases, dying in their sleep or after breathing just a few lungfuls of poisoned air. As noon approached, fire was finally controlled. The casino was total loss, interior completely gutted. Multiple tower floors had varying smoke and water damage. But first came the grim task of accounting for everyone in the building that morning and searching every space for victims. Investigators from multiple agencies descended to determine exactly what happened and why. The National Fire Protection Association sent a team. Nevada State Fire Marshal opened an investigation. Local authorities conducted their own inquiry. Insurance companies hired private investigators. Eventually, all reached similar conclusions about both the fire's origin and why so many died. The fire started from an electrical ground fault in wiring above the delicatessen, a relatively simple failure that happens daily in buildings. In most cases, such failures trip circuit breakers. In this case, the fault created heat igniting surrounding materials. Within minutes, that small ignition spread into the casino's dropped ceiling and from there into the casino itself. Rapid spread was attributed to combustible materials in ceiling space, open casino design, lack of fire barriers, and critically, complete absence of automatic sprinklers. If the casino had sprinklers, investigators concluded, the fire would likely have been controlled or extinguished in early stages. Sprinklers detect heat and begin flowing water before fires grow large. Sprinklers would have activated when fire was still confined to ceiling space, potentially extinguishing it before entering the casino proper. The cost of installing sprinklers would have been perhaps $2 million during construction, a tiny fraction of total cost. That $2 million decision not to install them, made legal by code exemptions, contributed to 85 deaths. The fire alarm system was inadequate for a structure of this size and complexity. There was no central alarm alerting all occupants simultaneously. Manual pull stations required someone to reach and activate them, meaning delays as staff determined if there really was fire. Notification devices, mostly bells, were difficult to hear over casino noise. Guest rooms had no smoke detectors at all. Guests became aware only when smoke reached their rooms or someone knocked to warn them. By then, in many cases, escape routes were already compromised. Investigation into deaths revealed consistent patterns. Of 85 fatalities, the vast majority died from smoke inhalation, carbon monoxide poisoning, or exposure to other toxic gases. Very few showed signs of burns. Most were found in rooms on upper floors or in stairwells and hallways. Smoke traveled through the building, so quickly many victims never had chance to escape. Some appear to have never woken, killed by carbon monoxide while sleeping. Others tried escaping, but were overcome in hallways or stairwells that filled with smoke faster than they could navigate them. The question of responsibility became complex. The building was constructed according to codes in effect at the time. Owners hadn't violated laws. Architects designed a building meeting all requirements. Contractors built what was specified. Inspectors approved it. But 85 people were dead, and consensus among investigators was deaths were preventable. The building codes themselves were the problem. They were inadequate, based on outdated assumptions about fire behavior and building design, written by people who'd never imagined a fire of this scale and speed. Civil lawsuits began almost immediately. Survivors and families of victims filed claims against MGM Grand Hotels, the building's architects, contractors, the city of Las Vegas, and various manufacturers. Legal proceedings dragged on for years, but eventually MGM settled most claims for a total exceeding $100 million, one of the largest such settlements in history at that time. The money could never compensate for lost lives or survivor trauma, but it was acknowledgement that something had gone terribly wrong and the company bore some responsibility. What emerged from investigation was a clear picture of how modern disasters occur. It wasn't single catastrophic failure, but rather a chain of smaller decisions, each seemingly reasonable at the time, that combined to create deadly conditions. The decision to exempt the casino from sprinkler requirements. The decision not to install voice evacuation systems. The decision not to pressurize stairwells. The decision to use combustible materials in construction. None of these alone would have killed 85 people, but together they created a building far more dangerous than it appeared. Investigation final reports ran to thousands of pages, but conclusions could be summarized simply. The fire started from common electrical fault. It spread rapidly because of combustible materials and lack of sprinklers. It killed people because smoke traveled through the building unchecked, and occupants had no way to know about danger until too late. Everything that went wrong was predictable, and almost all could have been prevented with systems and designs that existed in 1980 but weren't code required and weren't implemented by choice. The MGM Grand Fire became a turning point in fire safety regulation across the entire United States. Within months, fire safety experts and code officials began pushing for sweeping changes that would have been politically impossible before 85 people died, but became inevitable afterward. The tragedy provided momentum needed to overcome resistance that had always existed when safety requirements added construction costs. The most significant change was requiring automatic sprinkler systems in high-rise buildings. Prior to the fire, many jurisdictions allowed exemptions for certain spaces, particularly large open areas like casinos and atriums. After the fire, the National Fire Protection Association revised its life safety code to require sprinklers throughout high-rise buildings, including hotels, with minimal exceptions. States and cities began adopting these new codes, some immediately and others over years. By the mid-1980s, it was essentially impossible to build a high-rise hotel in the United States without complete sprinkler systems. Fire alarm and communication systems were also upgraded. New codes required voice evacuation systems that could broadcast specific instructions to building occupants. Smoke detectors became mandatory in hotel guest rooms. Alarm systems had to alert all occupants simultaneously rather than relying on manual activation. The old system of bells that might or might not be heard was replaced with systems combining audible alarms, visual strobes, and voice messages directing people to safest exits. Smoke control became a major focus of building design. Engineers developed systems to pressurize stairwells, keeping them clear even when the rest of the building was affected. Elevator lobbies were designed to be smoke-proof. HVAC systems were equipped with controls that would shut down automatically when smoke was detected, preventing distribution throughout buildings. The concept of compartmentalization, dividing buildings into separate fire zones with rated walls and doors, became standard practice rather than optional enhancement. Changes extended to existing buildings, not just new construction. Jurisdictions passed retrofit requirements mandating older hotels install sprinkler systems within specified timeframes. The MGM Grand itself reopened 8 months after the fire with complete sprinkler system installed, along with upgraded fire alarms, pressurized stairwells, and other improvements. The renovation cost tens of millions, but it transformed the building from fire trap into one of the safer hotels in Las Vegas. The fire also changed how hotels trained staff and managed emergencies. Prior to the fire, most hotel employees received minimal fire safety training. Afterward, comprehensive training programs became standard. Staff learned how to recognize fire conditions, activate alarms, evacuate guests, and communicate with emergency responders. Regular fire drills became mandatory rather than optional. Hotels developed detailed emergency plans and designated staff to specific roles during evacuations. The broader impact on hospitality industry was substantial. Insurance companies began requiring sprinklers and other fire safety features as coverage conditions. Investors and lenders made safety improvements part of due diligence when financing hotel projects. Guests became more aware of fire safety, with some travelers specifically asking about sprinklers when booking rooms. Competitive pressure to demonstrate safety became as important as legal requirements. The legacy of the 85 victims extends beyond code changes and building improvements. The fire prompted research into fire behavior, smoke toxicity, and human response to emergencies. Universities established fire protection engineering programs. The science of understanding how people react during evacuations, how smoke moves through buildings, and how to design structures protecting occupants became more sophisticated. Every subsequent improvement in fire safety built on knowledge gained from analyzing what went wrong at the MGM Grand. Today, the building that was the MGM Grand in 1980 is known as Bally's Las Vegas, having been renamed after MGM built a new, much larger resort further south on the Strip. The building still stands, still operates as hotel and casino, still welcomes thousands of guests. But it's fundamentally different than it was on November 21st, 1980. Every floor has sprinklers. Every room has smoke detectors. Stairwells are pressurized. The alarm system delivers specific instructions. Materials used in construction are fire-rated. If the same electrical fault occurred today in the same location, the fire would likely be extinguished automatically within minutes. And even if it spread, smoke would be contained, alarms would alert everyone immediately, and escape routes would remain passable. The memorial to those who died is modest, a plaque inside the building most guests never see. There are no grand monuments, no annual ceremonies, no public recognition of what happened. Las Vegas is a city that prefers looking forward rather than back, that sells dreams rather than remembers nightmares. But for those who survived the fire, for families of those who died, and for fire safety professionals who studied what happened, the MGM Grand Fire remains a defining event. The lesson is ultimately about the cost of knowledge. We learn fire safety through tragedy, each disaster teaching us something we didn't know or wouldn't believe until evidence became undeniable. Before the MGM Grand, we knew buildings without sprinklers were more dangerous, but we allowed exemptions because risk seemed acceptable. We knew smoke could kill, but we didn't fully understand how quickly it could spread through modern buildings. We knew people needed alerts, but we underestimated how difficult effective emergency communication was. 85 people paid the price for that incomplete knowledge. Their deaths purchased safer buildings for everyone who came after. Every hotel guest who sleeps in a room protected by sprinklers and smoke detectors benefits from lessons learned that November morning. Every person who evacuates safely because a voice alarm gave clear instructions owes something to those who died in confusion and smoke. The tragedy cannot be undone, but it need not be meaningless if we remember what it taught us and remain committed to the principle that human life is worth the cost of prevention.